Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Western Hunting Hub podcast, and it's Dre and I today. Take two on our attempt to find our words and talk about something that makes sense. But
Words are hard sometimes.
I know they're hard. And we really wanted to start with a recap on our giveaway, as I have that in my truck right now, all packaged up, ready to go to the post office to get sent to Kelsey. And I know she is really excited about receiving her binos, her Kafaru little package, and her Onyx hunt memberships. So I can't remember if she said anything about the Onyx or if she had that or not. So Kelsey, if you're listening, there's 2 memberships in there. Make sure you give one to somebody. And there's one in there for you as well. So she didn't have a pair of binos, and she has some elk hunting goals this year. So it's kind of cool to get those binos in somebody's hands that is going to use them and needs them. She had told me she had been borrowing her fiance's when they're out hunting. Just, when you're out hunting and you got to borrow someone's real quick just to see or whatever. That's a pain. It doesn't work well. And now she's got her own. I told her, remind her fiance they're hers and to not let him use them all the time. They're hers. So I'm excited about her getting those. I think that went to a great individual, new listener, and also because of Hunt Arizona, that's how she got connected. It was all through Ryan and a member of Hunt AZ. And when Ryan shared all this, that's how she got connected to the podcast, and her and her fiance have been listening. So shout out to Kelsey. I hope you enjoy those. They'll be on their way today. So that's pretty cool. So next, I have a listener email that we got. So Dre, if you want to read that, and instead of just emailing back, I figured we'd chat about it and help some of the listeners with it. So
yeah, I'll go ahead and just read this email he sent us. So this email is from Ben Honig. Sorry, Ben, if I pronounced the last name wrong, but Ben emailed us, and this is what he said. Hey, Clint, I'll start with saying keep up the great work. I like how your podcast could be any one of us just talking about our experiences, down to earth and practical. On your last podcast with Melissa, you mentioned goat hunting and what seemed like you've drawn in Colorado. True statement. I am planning to put in for G3 this year. I have the 3PP along with 048 early season deer. Which tips would you provide for applying for goat or multiple species? I usually chase deer in southwest Iowa, the sandhills of Nebraska. Been chasing elk in Colorado since 2015, and each year gets better and better. No successes yet. This year, I have a chance to put in for elk, deer, and goat in the same general area. P.S. The Washington folks are good friends of mine. I like that you're on board with their products. Thanks in advance.
the wilderness athlete people, WA people.
WA.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. Anyway, to answer that question, I'm going back quite a few episodes, a long, long time ago. I put this hunt planner together. I think episode 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. So we're on episode 66. So back when I was using some horrible platform, didn't have a Zoom thing to record on, and audio quality was not great. So anyway, people probably don't know much about those previous episodes. And I put a little hunt planner together to help you with your own. And I think the go-to answer for these questions are all of the subscription-based things that you can get to help with your hunting, all the planning and all of that sort of thing. And here's a little prelude to what we're going to be chatting out with Onyx here in the next couple of weeks. Is they have some products now that they are partnering with. So there's something there. I've looked into it a little bit, and the top rut thing is already public, but there's something else they're working on. So I'm interested to see what that is. I have no idea. I know the top rut thing I poked around looked pretty cool as another one of those subscription-based things to help you with applying for tags. However, if you're a cheapo or you've got time on your hands, or you just really like digging into stats, this is the thing that I set up just as another way to budget your hunting instead of spending $150 on a membership or $100 on a membership for someone to help you get the tags. So what I do is I fill out a big old spreadsheet document of what I want out of a hunt. And so let's go with goat hunting. Yes, I was successful in a goat hunt, getting a tag in 2019. And part of that was how I was applying and what I was applying for. And so I created this little hunt planner. It's a document. I'll put it in the show notes so you can check it out. If you like it, great. If not, it's kind of like a worksheet you would get in school, just to guide you along and to fill in some of those things as you're planning multiple states. Or this one's mainly for Colorado, but it starts off with, what are your goals? And so with my goat hunt, I had certain goals. I moved to Colorado 8 years ago. Now I'm in South Dakota, but I moved there specifically because I wanted to hunt a goat. Yeah, I guess my wife's job brought us there, but the main thing I wanted to do was expand my hunting, and hunting mountain goats. That was just that. There's some kind of draw to it. And I sat down and decided it doesn't matter what kind of goat. I just want to hunt a goat. So trophy quality, that's not a goal of mine. Just the hunt experience is what I wanted. Okay, so it didn't matter Nanny Billy. All right, so there's one thing that helps me determine how I'm applying. Next is, how long do I want to wait for that? Am I wanting to wait the 15, 20 years for one of those really, really coveted ones? Or do I want to have an opportunity to chase something a lot sooner? The next was, what are the success rates of that unit? So I tried to find goat units that had a 80% or higher success rate, and you have to look at the previous 3 years or more, because some of those seasons, you'll notice when you start applying for them, they might have, there's a couple that I noticed that have 0% success or 100% success in these different seasons, and depending on the year. So that tells me that there was a weather-related event somewhere in that season that either pushed the goats down or didn't push them, and they just weren't in that area. So there were some hunters that were not successful, or all hunters were not successful in those 0% years, and that was really weather dependent. So that was one of those units I said, yeah, I could draw that tag within a few years, but there's a high level of risk there that I don't want. So I wanted to find something that had I can't remember what it was, 50 to 80% success rate is what I went off of. I decided I'm a fit hunter that can go further than most. So I figured 80%, that's 90% for me. That was my guess. So that, and then I also decided I wanted to draw within so as soon as possible. So I picked ones that had, based on the number of points I had, a 3 to 5% success rate, or 5% was getting a little high, but somewhere in that 3%, 5%, somewhere in there. And so I took all of those and I started writing down, here's the unit, here's the success, here's how long it's going to take me to draw roughly. And then I went and had probably 5 different units, and I started comparing them, looking at the some other notes that you can read, terrain, all of those other little factors that you find out about that unit. And then it led me down to like three different choices. So then from there, I was able to make a decision. This one looks good. And that's what I applied for, was lucky enough to get it, and was an awesome hunt. So if for any of those high stakes or the coveted tags, I like to do that with the moose, with the sheep, and try and really plan that out. And within one evening, sitting on the couch, doing a lot of internet research, you could do one species. So on that hunter planner part 1 thing that I put together, there's a getting started checklist, some things that you need to do before you even start, and then a place to write down your goals, like what is your primary motivation for going on this hunt, who's going with you, what are your limitations, what species or what method of take do you want, and so on. a do-it-yourself or outfitter. So there's lots of variables that go into play there. And then moving down the list, I even have links to every little publication that you would need, even to the link of if you need your hunter education. You can find ways of getting that. However, with COVID, basically most states can do online anyway. And then down to the regulations. So if there's some things with sheep and goat hunting, if you're looking at that, if you needed to write down a couple of, that's a unique law, write that down. Like you don't really need orange for mountain goat. And then write down some place to document some of those hunt codes. And then down below, I keep scrolling, and I'll share this with you guys, the tag options, and kind of what the stats are. So you really got to get used to some of the stats pages with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and find out how to navigate those, because that's going to give you a lot more success, and you're going to have an idea of what you're applying for. So there's some stuff there. Wade through it. It's not like the clearest thing to understand by just skimming over it. You got to read what I put there, and I have examples so that you can kind of follow me along in my thought process in that hunt planner. So thanks for the kind words, and Ben, and I appreciate you reaching out on that. I wanted to do this over a podcast instead of just one random email to somebody. So what I would do for any of your stuff is really dive into those stats and align those stats to what your goals are, and try and find something that you can be successful at. If it's elk, I don't think there's any reason to hoard too terrible many points for elk in Colorado, or deer. There's some really great opportunities in that 2, 3, 4, 5 point area. Yeah, you're going to go on a crazy hunt of a lifetime in Unit 2, 201, whatever for elk after you have 25, 30 point, or the point creep now I think it's like 29 points.
Wow.
So it's just
Better
one of those.
Start now if you're gonna do that.
Yeah, and even then, the point creep would be like 60.
Yeah, exactly.
It just keeps
Retirement
going up.
Hunt.
Yeah, so it just.
Yeah.
I don't even know the solution to that, or what that's going to look like after a point, because you have those folks die. Those people are going to die off. The baby boomers, that's a known thing. The hump in the number of hunters, baby boomers, when those guys die and gals die, then our percentage of hunters goes way down. So
oh wow, didn't know that.
Yeah. That's the concern right now with backcountry hunters and anglers and state agencies doing R3 recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters, and noticing the trends or the statistics of who our hunters are. And the majority of them, I think I can confidently say this without looking at any stats, but white, male, and baby boomers. I know it's baby boomers for sure. So as those folks age out of hunting, what happens? So something to think
Great
about.
Info.
Yeah, something
Great
to
tips, Clint.
think about, and what is the future of our sport. So yeah,
I really like that you talked about the goals. So I am going to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with applying for tags. Most of my hunts have just been over the counter, and then I apply for deer, and usually that's like a 2 or 3 year draw rate.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a lot of experience. So for me, that's something I'm looking forward to learn more about as well. But I really like the fact that you pointed out the goals. You know, what are you looking for in your hunt? And that really narrows down, I think, a lot of your search from there.
Yeah, and one thing I would really, really encourage people to do is, even if they know I'm not going to go in the next couple of years, get a couple of points for whatever state it is. And I realize that can be pretty spendy, but if you have, like, I've really wanted to do a Wyoming antelope hunt, and I'm not planning on even doing that next year, but I go and buy my preference point, and now I'm 4 points. I can go get a pretty sweet tag, a way better tag than what I would have with 0. And so the day I plan to do that, I'm going to have options. I'm not going to have the best tag in the state, but I'm going to have options. So that'll be a good deal. And I do that in a couple of states. I don't make I make an average salary. So I only do that in South Dakota, Colorado, and Wyoming. I don't even do the elk in Wyoming just because it adds up. So if you can add preference points here and there, it's a good deal to be able to create opportunities for you in the future.
Absolutely.
So you just got back from Arizona on your 30th birthday hunt. So happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
It sounded like you had a great time.
Quite the adventure.
Yeah.
A lot happened.
Yeah.
It started out with some pretty snowy roads, high blood pressure the entire time. We were very, very happy once we arrived in Arizona to be out of the truck. We were pulling a 14-foot trailer, which my buddy had built out. And so that's what we stayed in. And it was really nice to have that at the end of the day, to come home to that and to be able to cook and be dry and warm and keep all of our gear in there. Several times we had mentioned, we're so glad we're not sleeping in a tent right now because we would be soaked. But super cool hunt. I learned a lot. Very, very challenging. We saw a lot of deer, and I'm really curious why they don't give out doe tags in Arizona. They should start doing that because we probably saw 300 does and not a lot of bucks. And so we saw a lot of different country. We hunted in the mountains. We hunted in the desert, like the flat desert. We hunted in the really rocky, cactusy desert. On my birthday, I actually did a stalk on, there was a really nice buck. He was a 6-point and he had 4 does. And right as we crested the ridge in the morning, we spooked them. I also didn't realize how skittish these whitetail are. That was a surprise for me compared to the mule deer here in Colorado. Yeah. So they saw us crest the ridge and they took off. And so I thought, I'm just going to drop down in there. I'm going to see where they go. Maybe I can get a little bit closer. Maybe they just kind of ran down there and stopped. Like, what's this going to hurt? And so I actually got on their tracks and started following their tracks down the hill. And I could see them just about 70 yards off through the thick cactusy desert terrain, bunch of rocks, and looked over to my left and I saw my buddy walking on the opposite ridge. And sure enough, they ran off further down into the valley. So I was like, well, I'm just going to keep working them. He's working them on the top of the ridge. They're probably going to run in front of me. If I can get closer to them, I might be able to have a quick shot. So I just kept working these little fingers. And I tell you, my legs are still covered in cactuses. Not easy country to try and navigate, especially when you're trying to be quick and quiet.
So, quick question for you: what species were you going for mainly?
We were hunting mule deer and Q's deer.
So, was it totally just either one kind of thing, or were you focused mainly on one?
I really wanted to shoot a Q's deer. My buddies really wanted to shoot a big muley buck. I've already shot a muley, so I thought it would be cool to look at a little Q's to add to my wall and have some whitetail meat in the freezer.
Yeah.
So that was my goal, was to focus on them. And I felt super dialed in this particular morning as I was making the stock. And turns out my buddies had no idea that I was stalking these deer. There was quite the lack of communication. We brought radios, but my radio just happened to be dead all the time. And growing up, we never really hunted with radios. So I kind of just forgot that was a tool that we had. And they didn't have their cell phones on them. So there wasn't any way for me to contact them and be like, hey, I'm stalking in on these deer. Can you guys chill out over there and maybe just hang out and they'll come towards you? And so initially my buddies saw these deer and started to pursue them, but then lost them in the terrain and figured they had just ran off when really they were down in the bottom of this drainage. And so what I did was I used the terrain and worked around, got down in the bottom, and there was this one ridge between the deer and I, and sneaked right up in there and got within 100 yards of them. And it was really cool to see this buck chasing around his does. The wind was in my favor. They had no idea I was there. And I had it all planned out as like, there's this giant rock I'm going to get behind and I'm going to sneak right up on him and it's going to put me right at 50 yards. he was chasing his does around. So there was a chance they were going to come towards me. And of course, I look up and the doe's sitting there. She's staring up at the top of the ridge, and she sees my buddy Dylan walking along the ridge, and he has no idea that these deer are down there, and they turn and they bolt. And my birthday stalk ended like that. But I was actually the one that had the most action. I put in a couple different stalks. I went out and hunted with Ryan from Hunt Arizona one night. He's like, I'm going to take you to a spot where we always see deer. Like, you say this about every spot that you send us to. There's a deer everywhere. And he's like, yeah, but there's usually a good buck in here. So sure enough, we get in there and we glass up some deer right away, a couple does, maybe a super small buck. I think he was a little spike. So we just kept glassing, found another little buck. I think he was a little 2x2 with some does. So I made a stalk on that, worked out perfect. They started coming up the hill towards me. And we're a little unsure whether it was the wind, if they winded me, or if the buck kind of just pushed them off, because the doe was coming right up the hill towards me. She was probably only 50 yards away, and he got in front of her and pushed her back down to the other side of the ridge. So I had some excitement. It was a lot of fun, very challenging. One of the most, besides turkey hunting, one of the most challenging hunts I've done with my bow. Huh. And that's mainly because of, for one, they're so alert, and then two, the terrain, you can't just like sneak around. You're constantly looking down, you're constantly dodging cactuses, and then the lack of big trees, and some of this terrain that we were hunting was pretty open, so you're putting yourself behind like a boulder or a cactus and trying to sneak in, and really makes you kind of stop and think, okay, how do I use the topography around me? How do I put that to my benefit and try and get in close?
Yeah, and one thing that doesn't always work too well is having multiple aggressive hunters. And aggressive hunting is sometimes worth the risk. But I've noticed same thing with whitetails here in the Black Hills, South Dakota, where if you're both being aggressive, kind of going off in similar but not different areas, you can really screw up hunts for each other, for sure.
Yeah, if I was solo hunting, I would like to think that I would have shot a buck that day. Along with a couple of the other stalks that I was on. There was another one I did. I snuck up closer to them and just realized I didn't want to shoot them. They were too small. And then come to find out, I was like, I should have just done it. That was my opportunity. A lot of times first day hunt, you have an opportunity and you pass it up because I'm like, I've got 4.5 more days to hunt. From what I hear, there's great quality bucks in here and there's a lot of deer. So I should hopefully have another opportunity. Yeah. So sometimes you really got to seize that first opportunity that you get.
Yeah. And I know the saying that's going through people's heads right now, but I don't believe it. The being happy with what you shoot on the first, or you know what I mean? The being happy with what you shoot on the first day, or you would shoot it on the last day. Oh, I don't even know what it is anymore because I think it's complete garbage. We actually
were talking about that, and we're like, if we don't fill our tags, we are happy to help out the Arizona Game and Fish. Our money's going towards them.
Exactly.
Towards everything with that. So it's not a loss in the end.
Yeah. And
a lot of times it's really easy to get wrapped up in, oh my gosh, I spent all this money to come out here and on my tag. And, you got to know going into these hunts that, especially this hunt, it's one of the most difficult hunts out there. Your chances of being successful is pretty low.
Yeah. And if you had shot a little 2-point first day, there would always be that sense of wonder of, I wonder if I could have found another one. That was easy.
Yeah.
I had that with my had that with my plains deer mule deer in Colorado this year, where I shot a deer the first morning, and it was an average nice mule deer, but I still got that little sense of wonder. On the last day, I would have been absolutely happy, pleased with him. On this first day, I was happy with him, but I still have a little underlying bit of wonder, knowing that there was giant bucks in the area and I saw them. It just was a matter of getting on them and catching them on some private or public. So there's still that little bit of wonder. And I agree with you. I would have been totally fine not filling the tag. Because I kind of wish I hadn't shot that one right away, because I wanted to hunt some more instead of just filling a tag right away. Yeah,
If
it
we
was
had
cool.
rifles, all three of us would have been tagged out within the first 2 days.
Oh
There
yeah,
was
huh?
there was a lot of deer. Most of the bucks we saw were cues, and they were all under 6 points. They were pretty small. We did see a really nice mule deer buck one night, and then we pursued it the next day and proceeded to see probably 50 does, if not more. But we were never able to find that buck. He had a hurt shoulder, so we were guessing with all the pressure in the area there was four-wheelers. There was this guy I was watching through my binos. I'm not sure if he was shed hunting, but he was just cruising around with no pack, no weapon, but he was looking at the ground like he was looking for sheds. And so that area in particular had a lot of public pressure with other people, four-wheeling, hiking around. There was a lot
Sure.
of quail hunters out there as well. So there was a lot of pressure in this area, which kind of makes sense why that buck just disappeared. But he was a good buck. I'll post a little video on our Instagram on him. But what I can tell you on this hunt was we laughed so much, we learned so much, we had so many great conversations while we were driving or while we were sitting in the camper at night. And we talked about this quite a bit, how these are the connections and the interactions that we thrive off of. You have relationships in your life, whether it's coworkers or friends of friends, where you don't feel that deep connection where you can just fully be yourself and talk about things you are passionate about. And that was a really big takeaway from this trip. We all had such a great time just disconnecting from everything and being with our friends that share the same passions. And those 5 days went by so fast. And we were talking about on our way home how it felt like a lifetime ago when we were driving through the snowstorm going into Arizona, but also how those 5 days went way too fast and we didn't want to go home. We just wanted to stay. And so once again, it's not always about filling your tag and getting that rack to put on the wall. There was a lot more from this hunt that really struck home, and our memories that we'll share and we can share with others through social media or the podcast and stories. But it was really cool to challenge myself in that terrain. And we definitely were challenged in many aspects. I think it was our fourth day, and we were hunting this new area. Another great thing about this trip was we hunted so much different terrain. We kind of looked at it as a scouting trip for December. So this tag that we have is a year-long tag as long as you don't fill it. And so we're planning to go back in December and hunt again. And now we have reference points as to, okay, this area has a lot of does. All right, this area definitely has some bucks, but there's not a lot of them, and having an idea of what that terrain looks like as well. And we definitely hit a low point. We were sitting there glassing. We were in the lower desert part, and we jumped a couple does and a buck. And we're like, there's got to be deer in here. Look at this terrain. Like, people don't want to hike this far back. And just we weren't picking anything up. And all of a sudden we're like, hey, let's go back to our first waypoint that we created, that we went to when we first got into Arizona. But there was a huge snowstorm going through, so we decided to head on down south. We're like, let's go back to that spot and check it out. All right, let's do it. And so we jump up, and all of a sudden there's this like new energy, and we're like, let's go. It's like a new adventure, And so that was really cool to see, like, all right, let's go here. And it's also good to hunt with people that have kind of the same mindset as you and are open to trying new things. And you will discover that as you hunt with different people as well, that some people just want to stick to one area. Some people want to do different things. And it was really cool to hunt with these two buddies that were like, all right, let's go. Something new. Let's go learn some new country. And we did when we got to this spot and had the most like magical sunset. And my buddy and I crested over this ridge, and the sun was setting, and neither of us pulled up our binoculars, and we just sat there in awe and stared at this country in front of us. It kind of looked like the western part of Colorado. You were a little bit further away from the desert, big cliffs, rolling pines. And we just had a moment where we're like, we can't look through our binoculars anymore. We've been doing it for 4 days straight. We just want to take this in, Like,
Well, and speaking of goals, matching your goal for your hunt, and then also aligning your hunting party with that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's going to contribute
Yep,
to the happiness of the hunt and how well that
exactly.
goes on, because you got to have the right people for the right
Yep,
type of hunt along with. And if
yep.
it's the guy that wants to sit at camp and just drink beer and have a good camp time, well, that's good. That's great time
Mm-hmm.
too. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's not the guy you're going to go on a backpack hunt with,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and
Our
vice
dynamic
versa.
was, yeah, our dynamic was pretty good. And Dylan stated it very well. He's like, Drea, you're the eyes. You can glass up deer. You, that's your strong suit. Nathan, he always wants to go to the next ridge. He's the one that's pushing us and is like, all right, you guys, we've been glassing here for a while. Why don't we go check out that next ridge? Let's go a little bit further. And Dylan was the guy that was like, all right, cool, let's go. So it was a great dynamic between the three of us. And I'm really looking forward to going back with those guys in December and hopefully notching our tags. If not, we're going to have a great time regardless.
So are they really the gray ghost? How was spotting them?
Oh,
And
so difficult. Luckily, we had that snow the first couple days. And of course, we were just kind of like, oh man, it's so snowy and the wind was insane. It was bitter cold, strong winds. And Ryan was telling us, you guys, you got to brace for it. You're going to be glassing into the wind because those deer are going to be hanging out on those faces where the wind is at their back. And so they're not in the wind. And so that's what we did. And every single deer we glassed up on those windy days were on those faces. But luckily we had that snow for the first couple days to really help. We went back into that area a few days later when the snow was all gone and we're like, this is a jungle. Like, we're not going to see these deer unless if they're up and feeding in the opens. If they're bedded down, it's going to be nearly impossible to see them. So very difficult to glass these animals when there's not snow and they're bedded down and they're not in the wide open.
what was the rutting activity like?
The mule deer were pretty much done with the rut, but the Q's deer, they were still in rut. I wouldn't say it was full rut yet. I think it was just kind of starting for them because some of the Q's we seen, there were bucks with the does, but they weren't being super aggressive. On my birthday, that stalk that I did in the morning, he definitely was chasing his does. His does were hot and they were kind of running the show. And he was just there following them around with his tongue out. And he's like, all right, let's party.
So, and
Yeah.
I know we've got a lot of Arizona listeners, so I'm sure there's some
Mm-hmm.
people that are critiquing
Yeah.
what we're talking about, because
Oh, I'm
they
sure.
they
But
they
this, yeah.
I'm sure know this stuff a lot more than you and I. But for the rest, we'll speak for the non-Arizona people, or give the Arizona people a touch to what these outsiders coming in are
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. So another thing
And
you
I'm sure
said.
it's the same thing. Sorry to interrupt you
No,
here,
you're
but I'm
fine.
sure it's the same thing with people coming out to Colorado to hunt elk or to hunt deer. I'm so used to glassing for mule deer in the higher country, but in Arizona, I guess it's opposite. The mule deer tend to hang out in the lower elevations, and the Q's deer tend to hang out in the higher elevations. I think between like 3,000 and 6,000 feet is typically where they're at. And so for me, I had to keep reminding myself, oh, oh, this looks great for mule deer. There's got to be some bucks up here in these cliffs. It's like, oh, no, typically here it's the other way around. Mule deer are down lower. So,
I want to bring up something that'll spark some controversy in people's
ooh,
as they listen, because people get passionate about what I'm about to talk about, but I could care less.
hmm,
So I'm just going to talk about it. So I heard you say 6 point. So I
ooh,
want to talk
yes.
about. I want to hear about Arizona, but let's talk about this for a sec. So Eastern count on a deer with 4 points on one side, 4 points on the other side. Most folks are going to call that an 8 point.
hmm,
In the West, mule deer, we have Western count. You have a 4 point on one side, 4 point on the other, and with eye guards or brow tines, that's typically going to be called a 4 point.
Hmm.
In the middle of all that, I'm right in that geographical divider of where people are doing that and not doing that. And that's where I grew up calling whitetail, mule deer, I'd call all of them a 4x4, 5x5,
Hmm.
7x8, whatever, or even just like a whitetail that just had 5 points on one side, we'd call him a 5 point.
Hmm.
And even though he was a 5x5, what do they do with Coues deer?
Apparently, as Ryan told me, is they don't count the eye guards. And so if there's
Similar
an
Western
eye,
count, then I suppose.
yeah, so this buck in particular that I was stalking in on my birthday, it had three on each side, so I call it a 6 point. Um, but yeah, apparently they don't count the eye guards. So
Okay, but they're
yeah,
counting kind of that similar Eastern, counting
yes,
all the
they're
points.
counting all the points and they're calling it. So I guess for this buck, they would call it a, what would they call it? I'm not sure, but 2x2 or a 4 point. They would call it a 4 point because they're not counting the eye guards.
Huh. And I think it's a waste of energy to get too hopped up on that. And if someone's blood is boiling right now, then just calm
Yeah,
down because
yeah.
it doesn't
Take a
matter.
breath.
We're all in
Yeah,
the same. We're all
exactly.
hunters, and being
Yeah.
okay with other regions' styles of hunting, other
Hmm.
uh, folks' lingo and language. It's similar to things like hunting deer with dogs. In some states, that's what you do. Other states, you don't do that whatsoever. That's unethical. You
Yeah.
can't do that,
Right.
and so on. But or running bears with dogs, or using shotguns, or even using spears for for things. I mean, there's
Hmm.
different styles and different things throughout the country, and being okay with that and understanding that that is part of that area's culture and style, I think is something important to recognize. So as you come west, you go east, you go wherever. I think it's fun to assimilate to that style of hunting, and I'm I'm gonna struggle with that. I may be getting invited to go to Iowa next year to do a hunt there. I will very much struggle calling it an 8 point. Um,
It's funny the things people get wrapped up in,
I know, I know, I know.
Right.
So I will deal with that, and I may even just to the point where I just avoid it the entire time. But there's
There you
no
go.
point arguing about it with anybody because that's the region and how they
Yeah,
do that, and
exactly. Waste of
looking,
energy and time to
yeah,
argue about
look at it as a
something like
way
that.
of getting some culture.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Every state's different.
yeah. So anyway, that was not something I was planning on talking about whatsoever. But you had a great time, and sounds like you're going to get some blog posts written up for the
Hmm.
hunt, and place you can we have your link down at the bottom of the show notes where folks can go and read those things as they come up. And we've never really given a shout out to that, so make sure all you listeners are checking that out. If you're liking blog posts, you can go read Drea's stuff as well as her Instagram, and you can see her pictures there. She's a great photographer who needs a new camera, but
Yeah, my camera broke. Like it was, I think, second day. It finally just went out. I was just talking to someone how this camera's so great because I take it on these hunts and it's so heavy duty and sturdy. And I think it was all the condensation that got inside it and finally said, peace out. So I'm in the market for a newer and better camera. So stay tuned for some better content coming your guys' way. I'm looking to purchase a camera that actually has video mode on it so I can incorporate both of those when I'm out, whether I'm just scouting or out hiking or hunting.
are
So
you
stay
able
tuned for that.
are you able to find one that you can use your same lenses for?
Yep.
Okay,
Hmm.
'cause that's a
The
big
great thing about
expense.
these, yeah, the lenses also are what makes your photos and your videos such good quality. The better your lenses are, the better your quality of imagery is going to come out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I got the morning off, but doesn't mean I really have it off. I got to go get some stuff done, sign some closing paperwork for my house
Hmm.
and whatever else. So I got some things to do, and we're at 41 minutes. So that sounds like a great time for a podcast. So
Boom. Yep. And I have a job too, so
yeah,
probably should get to that today at some point.
Yep. So as always, we appreciate all you listeners out there. And Dre, we had we talked earlier about questions. What we wanted to do with that.
Oh, absolutely. If you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to email us or DM us on Instagram or Facebook. And what we're hoping to do is take all those questions and do an episode on just answering your guys' questions. So it's not going to be right away because we want to get a few questions lined up, and then we'll put together an episode with all of your guys' questions in review and put them out there for you guys.
And please don't treat that as we're the experts, because we're not at all.
Yeah.
So it's something that you want to find out. You've got us to go do some homework. We've got connections all over, and that's the whole point. We'll go find out those answers, do a little research on it. Just like I'm digging into dark house spearfishing right now because I want to bring that to light to people, but I know nothing about it. So I'm digging into it. Exactly. So if you know anything about that, I'd love to chat with you. So if you've got general area questions on hunting in the West, we'd love to chat or read your question on that and chat with folks to get your answers on that. So, alrighty. Well, that sounds like a good plan, and we'll chat with you next time.
Sounds good.
But it ain't my ground, this is God's country.